The Earth is suddenly hit by unknown light that turned it into an apocalyptic deserted world. And in this ruined sand world, your wealth is based on how strong you are. So if you are weak, you're poor. But our MC here awakened a simple power that is to control sand. But in this deserted world, can you imagine what he's capable of? The entire world is in his hands, and his potential is limitless. The story begins with Zeon, our protagonist, a miserable peasant caught in the middle of a group of ruthless, ugly men. However, our boy isn't completely helpless, as he fights back, recalling that he has never truly killed anyone before. There was only one incident, a small accident where a man tried to steal his belongings and ended up dying unintentionally. In this world, awakeners are treated like gods, and the thought that he may have killed someone connected to Leong, an awakener, terrifies him. The same thug remains completely unaffected by Zeon's punch and retaliates by slamming him aside, using his awakened power to teach him a harsh lesson. Fortunately, an unexpected accident causes their vehicle to flip over, injuring the man in the process. As the driver clings to life, he reveals that they are being swallowed whole by a massive sandworm the size of Godzilla. Zeon struggles to hold on, convinced that this is the end for him. He knows he is weak, and if only he were stronger, things might have been different. The sandworm devours him, yet somehow, he does not die. Instead, he finds himself alive inside the creature, shocked by the impossible situation. Surrounded by the remains of what seems to be humanity's downfall, visions of a ruined world flood his mind, revealing what has become of their once thriving planet. In that moment, Zeon awakens his first ability. Acting on instinct, he chants Sand Blaster, firing a powerful shot that pierces through the creature's body. Now armed with a newfound power, he dares to believe he can survive even against impossible odds. He feels every beat of his heart, as if his entire body is surging with energy, and realizes that this is the awakening process taking place. Meanwhile, the sandworm prepares to devour him completely, but Zeon stands his ground, refusing to back down. Just as the creature lunges, a mysterious man suddenly appears and intervenes. With incredible speed, the man throws Zeon into the air, causing him to crash heavily onto the ground. Confused and disoriented, Zeon wonders how this stranger appeared out of nowhere. When he looks up, he is horrified to see the man driving a blade into the sandworm's neck, dark blood bursting from its body. The man casually mocks the creature for making him climb so high before preparing his final move. With a powerful kick, he drives the sword deeper, killing the monster instantly. Zeon is left stunned, realizing that defeating such a creature is no easy feat, especially since this is his first encounter with a sandworm. Before he can even process what just happened, a blue-haired shoddy approaches him and reveals that the man is Captain Zhang Yongbem, known for being flashy. Zeon is completely confused by how these people seem to appear out of thin air. As the woman casually praises her captain, Zeon notices her overwhelming presence and realizes she is incredibly powerful. At the same time, he feels his body starting to freeze, adding to his confusion. Captain Zhang remarks that a sandworm is not even a challenging opponent for him, then addresses Giselle while glancing at the scene. Turning back, he finds the two interacting. Giselle, playful yet obedient, has no trouble dragging Zeon around like a rag doll. In an instant, she overpowers him and pins him down, leaving him completely helpless. Giselle begins guessing Zeon's rank and abilities, wondering how she should figure it out. However, she soon notices something unusual. Zeon is not an awakener at all. Pinned to the ground, he cannot believe what he is hearing. She continues twisting his arm while informing the captain that he has no rank insignia. Zeon is confused, thinking she must be mistaken since every awakener is supposed to have one. From inside the vehicle, another teammate shouts at them to hurry up. Giselle then asks the captain what they should do, pointing out that it would be strange to leave him there to die. Ironically, Zeon finds this amusing, considering she was just about to break his arm. Captain Zhang studies him briefly before instructing Giselle to toss him into the back, as he seems to be heading toward the mine anyway. In the next scene, Zeon finds himself inside a damaged vehicle, filled with a noisy and chaotic group. Captain Zhang's team is far from calm, creating constant commotion. Meanwhile, Zeon is tied up in the back like luggage, forced to listen to their conversations. As sand begins drifting into the vehicle, it becomes clear that Zeon is secretly manipulating it, confirming that he has indeed awakened his powers. However, he cannot understand why no one can see his rank insignia. When he checks it himself, he notices something strange. The mark appears orange, blending almost perfectly with the color of sand. Normally, the color of an insignia determines an awakener's classification, blue for magic types and red for combat types. Although there are rumors of other classifications, Zeon has never heard of anyone capable of controlling sand before. Even as he effortlessly manipulates it, he realizes his ability is completely unique. Unfortunately, he also recognizes that he is considered an F rank, the lowest tier. Still, there is a silver lining, as his power seems to have limitless potential, allowing him to adapt like the desert itself. Satisfied with this, Zeon decides to hide his abilities for now, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. Deep down, he believes that one day he will gain control over the entire desert and perhaps even dominate the planet itself. This raises an unsettling question. Will he become a hero or something far more dangerous? Eventually, they arrive at a stunning magic crystal mine, Observing the checkpoint, Xion notes that everything appears normal at first glance. One of the men orders him to follow without speaking, leaving Xion no choice but to comply. From a distance, Giselle and Captain Zhang discuss how unusual the boy is. While some might assume he survived purely by luck, the captain strongly disagrees. Earlier, he noticed a massive hole in the sandworm's body, suggesting that Xion was somehow involved. Despite this, he chooses not to question the boy further, believing they are destined to meet again. As the story progresses, a surprising twist unfolds. Instead of dark tunnels, the mine is filled with people enjoying festivities, completely defying Xion's expectations. The man escorting him mentions that he will call the supervisor soon and tells him to stay put. Left alone, Xion feels uneasy in such an unfamiliar place. The man even jokes about putting a bullet in his head before walking off, leaving him free to move around, convinced it would not matter anyway. Ignoring the threat, Xion realizes he is starving and begins searching for food. As he looks around, he spots a shop that might satisfy his hunger. At that moment, his attention is drawn to a poster on the wall, one that encourages laborers to contribute to lighting up the city. The seller hands Xion a drink and casually asks if he finds the movement inspiring. His hands are rough and covered in scars, hinting at a harsh past, as he explains that the city's true energy source is not mana stones. Confused by where the conversation is going, Xion asks what he really means. The man points directly at him and reveals that people like Xion are the real source of energy. They are ordered around endlessly, and when one falls, another simply takes their place, making them an infinite supply. Annoyed by the insult, Xion snaps back, telling the old man to worry about his own limited time instead. The man calmly replies that everything seems interesting at his age and then unexpectedly mentions Xion's experience inside the sandworm, leaving him stunned. The old man continues mocking him, claiming that a kid like Xion will end up inside a sandworm again, since this place is no safe haven. Xion defends himself, insisting he is only here to earn money. The man then points to a pile of junk behind him, urging Xion to take a closer look. At first, Xion sees nothing but useless scraps, but the seller explains that each item once belonged to someone who came here before him. These are the remnants of people who met the same fate awaiting Xion. Many try to resist entering the mines, but the temptation of mana stones is too strong. Out of fear, they sell everything they own just to survive, clinging desperately to life while losing pieces of themselves. In the end, nothing changes, and everything they gain eventually slips away. With no hope left, the old man now tells newcomers the harsh truth directly: the mine will consume them. He cruelly adds that people like Xion will not even leave behind a name, and admits he looks forward to seeing what remains of him after death. Frustrated, Xion ignores the insults and asks for the price of the drink. The man demands an absurd amount, causing Xion to shout in disbelief. Apparently, everything in this place is expensive, even the simple skewer he ate earlier. Xion complains about the poor quality and admits he cannot afford such a price. As he argues, he fails to notice that the surrounding workers and butchers have begun drawing their weapons. They are completely merciless, ready to cut him down without hesitation. Xion stubbornly refuses to pay, but one man suddenly sneaks up behind him, intensifying his fear. The old man then poses a question, asking how someone like him manages to run a business in such a terrible place. The answer is simple: they are all corrupt. When Xion looks around, he realizes he is surrounded by more than a dozen armed men. Acting like a crime boss, the old man asks what he plans to do next. Xion shouts that he has nothing to offer and that the price is unreasonable. Taking advantage of the situation, the man suggests that Xion hand over the mana stone in his pocket as payment. Shocked that his possession is already known, Xion hesitates while the man assures him he will offer a fair deal. Refusing outright, Xion declares that he nearly died to obtain that stone. He tries to reason with the old man, but his words carry no weight. Suddenly, a large man grabs his head and slams it against the table, even suggesting they bury him on the spot. Enraged, Xion imagines unleashing a sandblaster and tearing through everyone, envisioning their defeat in a burst of power. However, reality hits hard. Instead of victory, he finds himself bleeding from the nose and unable to act, cursing his weakness. In the end, he is forced to surrender the mana stone, giving the old man exactly what he wanted. The seller examines the stone and comments on its size, estimating it to be worth around 100 souls. Xion argues that it should be at least 300, but the man dismisses him, knowing he holds all the leverage. He mocks Xion again, suggesting he should have become a sandworm instead of coming here. After another rough shove, Xion reaches his limit and considers using his powers to escape, but he knows he is still too weak. Instead, he negotiates for a bonus in exchange for the stone. The old man agrees, warning him to watch out for pickpockets, and allows him to choose anything from the pile of junk as part of their deal. As Xion searches through the pile, he struggles to find anything useful. The old man watches with curiosity, noting how reluctant Xion is to waste even a single coin, a rare trait in this place. While sifting through the items, Xion comes across something unusual, an object that even the seller finds interesting. In the end, he chooses a small hourglass as his reward. As he prepares to leave, the man mocks him once more for selecting trash. Before walking away, Xion asks for his name, and the man introduces himself as Klexi. Xion memorizes the name, hoping they never cross paths again. though his tone carries a clear threat. Clexi, however, remains completely unfazed. Later, inside his quarters, Xion examines the hourglass more closely. He notices that it takes about 10 minutes for the sand inside to fully run through. Wanting to test his abilities, he takes a deep breath and focuses, commanding the sand within the hourglass to move. To his surprise, nothing happens. Confused and frustrated, he begins to doubt whether his powers are truly related to his awakening. His ability remains a mystery, as he has never seen anything like it before. Still, he cannot shake the strange feeling that the hourglass was deliberately placed for him, as if it had been calling out to him all along. Before he can think further, the door is suddenly kicked open by a man demanding to know if he is the new arrival. Xion is immediately insulted and berated for not already being at the mine. The man, Manhwa, shows no patience and ignores Xion's attempt to speak respectfully. Instead, he delivers a brutal uppercut that sends Xion flying. Without stopping, he follows up with another punch to the abdomen, ordering him to stay quiet. As if that were not enough, he steps on Xion like he is nothing more than trash, all because his pride was offended. Calling him a worthless non-awakener, Manhwa declares that people like him should stay quiet and endure beatings if they want to survive. Satisfied with the punishment, he orders Xion to get up and follow him immediately. Xion forces himself to stand, refusing to show fear. The first thing he does is call Manhwa a psychopath, declaring that no matter what happens, he will kill him one day. It is clear he is already building a list of enemies he plans to take down in the future. At the third sector of the mine entrance, Xion is brought to the main worksite and quickly forced into gear. He is told that the cost of his food and equipment will be deducted from his pay, and that his only purpose is to collect mana stones like a slave. At first the task sounds simple, but before he can even ask another question, Manhwa smashes his helmet with a pickaxe. He coldly states that he does not care if Xion knows how to mine, and that the broken helmet will also be deducted from his wages. Manhwa then orders a subordinate to throw Xion into shaft number 972, one of the worst areas in the mine. Xion no longer resists and simply follows orders, while being warned that if he does not return with a mana stone, he will be executed immediately. Inside this hellish workplace, even his assigned partner admits that this shaft is the worst possible location. It also happens to be the day Manhwa lost money gambling, surprising Xion that such places even exist here. The man casually explains that everything is available in this place, just like Neo Soul. Xion begins to understand that with corrupt people like Manhwa in charge, businesses like these thrive without consequence. Worried about his ability to even swing a pickaxe due to his beta male body, Xion questions how he will survive. His companion reassures him in a strange way, saying that no one has ever been injured in that tunnel, not a single person. The statement feels more like a warning than comfort. Eventually, they reach the assigned shaft. Xion asks if all he needs to do is mine crystals and return, but the man quickly cuts him off, revealing that he will not be coming back. More than a dozen workers have already disappeared in that tunnel, and no one knows what happened to them. Some people are even betting on whether Xion will survive. With nothing but a weak apology, the man leaves him behind. Realizing the truth, Xion shouts in anger, understanding that everyone sent here is meant to die. Instead of breaking him, the betrayal fuels his determination. He grips his pickaxe and prepares to mine, but his very first swing fails as the tool slips from his hand and flies across the ground. What a dumbass. Frustrated, he tries to retrieve it while questioning how he is supposed to survive in such a place. As he calms down, he begins to sense something unusual. The mana in this area is incredibly dense, far beyond anything he has felt before. He wonders if others could not sense it simply because they were not awakened. The deeper he moves, the heavier the pressure becomes, confirming that a normal person would have already succumbed to mana overload. Eventually, he finds his pickaxe, though it appears damaged. Relieved, he picks it up, but before he can react, the ground beneath him gives way. A dark void suddenly opens, pulling him down into an unknown abyss. His helmet flies off beside the broken tool as he falls. This moment triggers memories of his past, a life filled with suffering and rejection. Everyone around him always told him he would die, forcing him to fight endlessly just to survive. He endured beatings simply for wanting basic necessities, and every dream he had was crushed by others. In the end, he even took a life, overwhelmed by fear and guilt, believing his own life was finished. Desperate to escape that fate, he ran, haunted by the name Leung. Back in the present, Xion regains consciousness after falling through the portal. He immediately notices the intense heat and the ash surrounding him. Realizing where he is, he curses his luck. The portal has led him into a volcanic dungeon filled with danger. A small stone rolls toward him, and when he grabs it, he quickly drops it from the intense heat. This confirms that everything around him is real. Drawing from what he knows about dungeons, he understands that there must be both an entrance and an exit. With his hand burned, he tears a piece of cloth to cover his mouth, knowing that the ash alone could suffocate him if he stays too long. Determined to survive, Xion assumes that the exit lies at the highest point of the volcanic area. Staying still would mean certain death, so he decides to move as quickly as possible while there are no visible monsters. With renewed determination, he charges forward, pushing his body to its limits. Despite his confidence, he barely avoids falling into lava and struggles to maintain his footing as the unstable terrain collapses beneath him. At one point, he nearly falls into the molten pit, barely saving himself by clinging to the edge. Even then, he refuses to give up, declaring that something like lava will not stop him. After barely surviving multiple near-death situations, his frustration grows, and he directs all his anger toward Manhwa, swearing revenge. However, he quickly regains focus, reminding himself that survival is his only priority. From his current position, he calculates that he needs only a few more jumps to reach the highest point. Without hesitation, he pushes forward, determined not to let his life end in such a place. Just as hope begins to rise, a massive creature bursts from the lava and devours him whole before diving back into the molten depths. However, the creature soon senses something unusual and looks upward. Zeon is still alive. He managed to escape its jaws and cling to a nearby ledge using his powers. Through this ordeal, he realizes that he can manipulate volcanic ash as well, which saved him from certain death. Exhausted and nearly unconscious from the intense heat, he struggles to breathe as the environment itself becomes his greatest enemy. His body begins to fail, and the thought of death crosses his mind once again. Refusing to give in, Zeon forces himself back up, clinging to his will to survive. Even in this desperate moment, he finds a strange motivation, refusing to die before experiencing more of life. Gathering what little strength he has left, he manipulates the volcanic ash once more, preparing for the monster's next attack. As the creature emerges again from the lava, Zeon braces himself for battle. Just then, a mysterious voice suddenly echoes, acknowledging his unique ability and praising his potential. Zeon is startled by the sudden voice, while the speaker expresses deep interest in his ability to manipulate sand. Moments later, an old man descends from above, almost like a blessing sent from the heavens. Gripping his sword mid-fall, he crashes down at incredible speed and slams directly into the monster. The sheer force of the impact sends shockwaves through the area, distorting the flow of lava and scattering debris everywhere. Zeon is nearly wiped out by the blast alone, his body trembling as the pressure ruptures his eardrums and dulls his senses. When he finally looks up, he sees the aftermath. The creature has been cleanly split in half. The man standing before him is on an entirely different level, far beyond any awakener Zeon has ever seen. The old man casually steps forward, each movement carrying overwhelming force. Zeon is left speechless, completely absorbed by the display of power. The awakener asks for his name, but when Zeon does not respond, he creates a tense situation, threatening consequences if the boy does not answer before he counts to 3. As the countdown begins, the man prepares himself, and by the time he reaches 1, he is already looming over Zeon like a terrifying presence. In the end, he does nothing, instead questioning why the boy looks so dazed. In truth, Zeon can barely hear anything due to his damaged hearing. Misunderstanding the silence, the man draws his sword, considering killing him outright for refusing to answer. Panicking as his hearing begins to return, Zeon quickly begs for mercy and explains that he does not understand what is happening. Relieved to hear him speak, the man decides he is not beyond saving and asks again for his name. Zeon finally answers, and the old man immediately mocks him for having such a pathetic name. Before Zeon can react, the man destroys a nearby boulder with ease, and introduces himself as Dae Odin. Even after hearing his name, Zeon remains confused by his actions. Frustrated, he demands an explanation, questioning why he is being insulted despite being saved. Dae Odin calls him a fool once again, and explains that Zeon has fallen into a dangerous phenomenon known as a snare. Ignoring the insults, Zeon listens carefully as Dae Odin explains that a snare occurs when a dungeon becomes oversaturated with mana. To stabilize itself, the dungeon creates additional entry points to release excess mana, which in turn draws in nearby living beings. Most people never encounter such a situation, making Zeon's luck exceptionally terrible. This revelation only strengthens Zeon's anger toward Manhwa for sending him there. Still unimpressed, Dae Odin insults him again before demonstrating something important. He tells Zeon to focus his mana into his eyes. Though confused at first, Zeon follows the instruction and begins channeling his mana into his vision. As he does, his perception changes completely. He begins to see things he could not before, and the realization terrifies him. Dae Odin explains that the creature Zeon faced earlier possesses stealth abilities, allowing it to hunt without being detected. The monster had been in front of him the entire time, yet Zeon never sensed it. Even the boulder Dae Odin destroyed earlier was actually another hidden creature. Without his intervention, Zeon would have died without ever realizing what killed him. Realizing that the old man has saved him twice now, Zeon becomes even more curious about his identity. When he asks, Dae Odin dismisses the question and simply repeats his name, refusing to elaborate. Zeon, still overwhelmed, demands to know how someone can be so powerful. Dae Odin casually explains that they are inside a dungeon and refers to it as his personal hunting ground. He then tells Zeon to watch carefully as he prepares to demonstrate his abilities. Drawing his sword, he shouts out a technique, unleashing a massive wave of force that echoes throughout the dungeon. Zeon instinctively covers his ears, confused at first, but soon realizes what is happening. The area is suddenly filled with countless fire-based monsters, swarming from every direction. Dae Odin appears thrilled by the sight, leaving Zeon behind and telling him to figure out how to survive on his own. Thrown into a life-or-death situation, Zeon curses the old man while desperately trying to think of a way out. However, escape is impossible. The monsters are far too fast, attacking him repeatedly and tearing his clothes apart bit by bit. He struggles to keep up, unable to track or defend against their movements. As the attacks continue, he notices something strange. The creatures keep targeting his left side repeatedly. Desperate, he tries to fight back using sand, but his attacks fail to land as the monsters easily evade them and strike back. Overwhelmed, Zeon feels completely useless compared to Daeodon. He raises his arms to shield himself, barely managing to protect his face as attacks rain down on him. Realizing he will die if he continues like this, he begins to panic. The thought of dying after being saved twice fills him with frustration and shame. In that moment, he recalls Daeodon's earlier words about seeing through mana. Though his ears are still ringing, he focuses on the lesson instead of his fear. Calling himself pathetic, he refuses to give up and begins concentrating his mana into his eyes once again. Slowly, he refines his control, increasing the clarity of his perception. He focuses on sensing the flow of mana rather than relying on his physical sight. This time, it works. He begins to detect the presence of the monsters through their magical energy. Now able to track their movements, Zeon waits for the right moment. As soon as one enters his range, he strikes precisely, finally taking down 2 of the flying creatures that had been attacking him. For the first time, he feels a sense of control in this chaotic battle. Meanwhile, Daeodon continues fighting much larger monsters in the distance, clearly enjoying himself. He remarks that it has been a long time since he has felt this excited in a fight, treating the entire situation as nothing more than a thrilling hunt. Daeodon charges forward and delivers a devastating punch, tearing the massive crocodile-like monster clean in half. As the creature collapses, he casually remarks that it was not even a proper opponent, sounding almost disappointed that it failed to give him any real excitement. He lets out a sigh and comments on how the number of dungeons has declined compared to his younger days. Watching the scene unfold, Zeon cannot help but feel a strange sense of pity for the monster. The way Daeodon killed it so effortlessly makes it seem no more threatening than a small lizard. Meanwhile, Zeon himself is reaching his limit, letting out a weak laugh at his own situation. Suddenly, a powerful shockwave hits him, forcing him to his knees as he vomits from the impact. Barely regaining his footing, he asks what just happened. Daeodon calmly explains that what Zeon felt was the roar of the dungeon boss. Every dungeon has a final boss, and that is the real reason he came here. Moments later, a massive drake descends from above. Daeodon identifies it as a crimson drake. Hearing the term, Zeon asks if it is a dragon, but Daeodon immediately corrects him. He even complains that it is disappointing to face only a B-rank creature instead of a true dragon. Despite his tone, the drake is clearly dangerous, surrounded by a powerful force field. Zeon recalls that higher-ranked monsters possess unique traits, similar to Awakeners. Observing the aura, he realizes it is blue, meaning the creature is magic type. Before they can react further, the drake unleashes a devastating black flame attack toward them. Frozen in fear, Zeon is unable to react at all. Meanwhile, Daeodon leaps directly into the attack and slams his massive sword onto the drake's head. The creature quickly retaliates, striking back with its claws. Daeodon attempts to counter using his technique, but unexpectedly gets caught in the drake's grip. Taking advantage of the opening, the monster prepares a close-range breath attack. However, Daeodon reacts instantly, forcefully shutting its mouth and trapping the flames inside. Calmly, he asks if the creature can feel pain before declaring that he will end it. Tightening his grip, he pushes forward and re-engages the drake, stating that this will be its final day. At the same time, Zeon is running for his life, caught in the middle of a battle far beyond his level. He struggles to even stand, let alone defend himself. Using his ability, he forms a wall of sand behind him to block incoming shockwaves. Shouting in frustration, he demands that they take their fight somewhere else, unable to comprehend how mere shockwaves can cause so much damage. Meanwhile, Daeodon is enjoying himself, comparing the fight to an amusement park. Another shockwave suddenly strikes, catching Zeon off guard. This time, he cannot react in time and is thrown violently through the air. His body crashes toward a pool of magma, leaving him frozen as he realizes he is about to die without accomplishing anything in life. The focus shifts back to Daeodon, who doesn't give a single care for Zeon's fate. Instead, he continues mocking the drake, calling it a disgrace among boss monsters. Enraged by the constant insults, the creature charges up another powerful breath attack. Seeing this, Daeodon smiles, excited by the challenge. The drake unleashes a concentrated blast of magic that tears through everything in its path, growing stronger as it travels. After the attack ends, the creature assumes victory, believing Daeodon has been completely obliterated. However, when it hears his voice behind it, everything changes. Turning around in fear, it finds him casually perched on its body, his sword buried deep within it. Daeodon calmly reveals that he has been searching for a creature like this for a long time, as he needs a crimson drake heart to strengthen his sword. Without hesitation, he drives the blade deeper, allowing magic to flow through the monster's body. The drake thrashes violently before finally collapsing. As its power is absorbed, the sword begins to glow with a crimson aura, signaling its growth. Satisfied, Daeodon admires his weapon, pleased with its evolution. His moment is interrupted when Zeon suddenly appears and questions why he is talking to his sword like a madman. Surprised, Daeodon notices that Zeon is still alive. Zeon explains that he narrowly survived by using his sand manipulation to cushion his fall when he was thrown toward the magma. Even he is shocked at how often he manages to escape death. He adds that enduring the shockwaves from Daeodon's fight has sharpened his reflexes. Daeodon shows mild approval but quickly shifts focus, grabbing Zeon by the collar and stating that the dungeon is collapsing now that the boss is dead. Confused, Zeon questions why he is being treated like baggage. Without warning, Daeodon throws him into a small crack that appears in space, casually telling him goodbye. While flying through the air, Zeon curses him endlessly, calling him worse than Manhwa. Moments later, he is ejected onto the surface, tumbling across the sand in a disoriented state. Spitting out sand, he asks where he is. Daeodon explains that defeating the boss opens exits back to the surface. Zeon immediately complains that they could have simply walked out instead of being thrown. Losing patience, Daeodon finally speaks seriously. He acknowledges that Zeon's sand ability has potential, but in his current state, he is still useless. He then offers him two choices: return to Neon Soul and live the same meaningless life, or follow him and grow stronger. When Zeon asks how long it would take, Daeodon bluntly admits he does not know. It could take months, years, or even decades. Faced with a life-changing decision, Zeon hesitates. Daeodon simplifies it brutally. He can either go back to his old life or take a path where he has a high chance of dying. Instead of being discouraged, Zeon bursts into laughter, questioning the old man's sanity. He sarcastically talks about returning to a luxurious life, mocking the idea of following an unpredictable old man through dangerous lands. Without hesitation, Daeodon confirms that this is exactly what he expects. After pretending to struggle with the decision, Zeon finally agrees to follow him. He admits that he holds grudges and wants revenge on those who wronged him, including Daeodon himself. At the same time, he acknowledges the old man's overwhelming strength and believes he will not find anyone stronger. As he speaks with growing confidence, Daeodon interrupts and mocks him, asking if he is prepared to die early. Zeon denies it and declares that he will become stronger than everyone else. Daeodon responds that such arrogance will only lead him to an early grave, but tells him to follow anyway. As time passes, the two travel together, but Zeon quickly begins to struggle. Drenched in sweat and barely able to keep up, he calls out to Daeodon, begging him to slow down and take a break after walking for 6 exhausting hours. Zeon keeps shouting for a break, but the old man ignores him and continues walking in silence. Frustrated, Zeon mutters to himself, insisting he is not some moody teenager, and questioning why he keeps having these sudden mood swings. The desert heat becomes unbearable, and every step through the loose sand drains his strength. He begins to worry that he might collapse from heat stroke at this rate. Just as he is about to give up, the old man suddenly turns to him, as if he had been waiting for that exact moment. He calls Zeon a fool who cannot even use a fraction of his own power. Confused, Zeon listens as Daeodon reminds him that he is a sand manipulator, yet he struggles to walk on sand, the very thing he should control with ease. Zeon tries to defend himself, saying he only awakened recently and is still in F class. That immediately irritates Daeodon, who dismisses the idea of rankings entirely. He demands to know if Zeon truly believes people are born as S-class while he alone was left behind. Grabbing him by the collar, the old man questions whether he plans to give up simply because he thinks he was not blessed. After venting his frustration, he throws Zeon back onto the sand and orders him to figure things out on his own. He insists that Zeon must understand his own power if he wants to break past his limits. Just when Zeon starts thinking the old man might be reasonable, Daeodon suddenly snaps again and warns him that failure will mean death. Taking the warning seriously, Zeon begins experimenting with his ability. He knows he can only control sand within a range of about 5 meters. Observing the terrain, he realizes the sand is only ankle deep and considers making it more solid to conserve energy while walking. Focusing his mana, he compresses the sand beneath him until it hardens like a floor. It works. Moving through the desert suddenly becomes much easier. However, he quickly notices how much mana this method consumes and realizes he cannot sustain it for long. Switching strategies, he concentrates mana into his legs instead. This approach proves more efficient, allowing him to move faster without draining himself as quickly. Watching him struggle and adapt, Daeodon quietly smiles, reminded of his own youth. Despite Zeon insisting he is only an F class, the old man believes his control and potential are closer to E or even D rank. Not long after, Zeon excitedly discovers an even simpler method. By controlling only the sand directly beneath his feet, he can move effortlessly without excessive energy use. Overjoyed, he runs toward the old man to show off his discovery, even becoming cocky enough to taunt him. Without hesitation, Daeodon knocks him out with a punch, telling him not to waste time on useless antics if he wants to survive. When Zeon wakes up, he finds himself lying face down in the sand. The old man is casually eating jerky nearby, and comments that carrying him was a hassle. As Zeon groans about his injuries, he is tossed a piece of jerky and told to listen carefully. Daeodon briefly shares a story from his younger days, a time when strength was used to protect the weak rather than exploit them. That world is long gone, and it is clear he misses it. The moment passes quickly, and he tells Zeon to get up if he does not want to die. This time, Zeon listens quietly, beginning to realize that beneath the harsh attitude lies genuine experience and wisdom. As they eat, Xion notices something interesting. Despite his worn-out teeth, the old man eats jerky with ease. By observing him, Xion learns the trick, softening it with saliva before chewing. It is a small but important lesson for surviving in such a dry environment. He begins to feel that the old man is not just feeding him, but teaching him how to survive. Like showing someone how to fish instead of simply giving them food. After resting, they continue their journey under the night sky. Xion keeps asking for more jerky, but the old man refuses, telling him to be quiet. As the temperature drops, Xion starts shivering uncontrollably, his body struggling to handle the freezing desert night. Meanwhile, Daoden remains completely unaffected, as if he were relaxing somewhere comfortable. Confused by the old man's strange behavior, Xion also cannot understand why he constantly talks to his sword. Soon after, thirst begins to take over. Xion asks for water, but the old man ignores him and drinks everything himself. Frustrated but desperate, Xion realizes he has no choice. Unlike the old man, he cannot extract moisture from fabric, so he resorts to licking dew from his own body just to survive. The old man mocks him for his behavior, but Xion insists he is simply doing what he must to live. Ignoring the argument, Daoden tells him to focus on sensing his surroundings. Though confused, Xion obeys and begins listening carefully. After some time, he picks up faint vibrations coming from multiple directions. Suddenly, he notices hundreds of glowing eyes surrounding them. A pack of horned hyenas has encircled them, ready to attack. These creatures are normally active at night, but due to poor timing, they have encountered them at dawn. As the beasts prepare to strike, Daoden casually asks if Xion can handle it alone or if he needs help. Fueled by determination, Xion refuses assistance and prepares for battle. Using his ability, he forms a sand bullet and fires it through one of the hyenas. Then, he creates large spikes of hardened sand, forming a deadly zone that impales anything that gets close. However, as the fight continues, exhaustion begins to take its toll. His mana drains rapidly, and he realizes he may collapse before the enemies are defeated. This makes one thing clear: raw power alone is not enough. He needs efficiency. As he prepares another attack, a hyena lunges forward and bites deeply into his arm. He manages to shake it off, but the damage is severe. Strangely, this injury sparks a realization. The wounds give him an idea of how to use his ability more efficiently. Standing still, he calmly plans his next move as the remaining beasts charge at him. At the last second, he unleashes a new technique. Hundreds of thin, razor-sharp sand spikes erupt from the ground, piercing through the entire pack at once. The battlefield is instantly cleared. Meanwhile, Daoden handles his own enemies in a completely different way, fighting them head-on without concern. Even as the hyenas bite into him, he laughs as if they are harmless. Then, with a sudden shift in expression, he becomes serious. With a single command, he unleashes overwhelming power, creating a massive explosion that sends shockwaves across the area. Xion barely manages to defend himself, forming a wall of sand to withstand the blast. When the dust settles, he is left speechless by the sheer destruction, questioning whether the old man is even human. However, the fight is not over. As Daoden coughs from the dust, the alpha of the pack seizes the opportunity and attacks. With a lightning-charged horn, it pierces through him. Caught off guard, the old man looks down in mild surprise, realizing that this particular beast is far stronger than expected, at least B-rank level. Seeing Daoden in what looks like a life-threatening situation, Xion panics and shouts for him to be careful. However, the concern turns out to be completely unnecessary. The old man casually grabs the hyena's lightning-charged horn as if it belongs to him, barely reacting to the electricity surging through it. Xion is left completely stunned, unable to process what he is witnessing. Even the alpha hesitates, backing away as Daoden seems to enjoy the lightning like a relaxing massage. After a moment, he declares that it is over, leaps forward, and drives his sword deep into the beast, ending the fight in an instant. Watching this, Xion realizes how foolish it was to worry about someone like him. After the battle, the two begin collecting materials from the fallen horned hyenas. Xion, now wearing the alpha's hide, asks when they will finally leave. He is surprised to see Daoden carefully collecting the horns, explaining that they are valuable for crafting lightning-based weapons. Without warning, the old man tosses him a dagger and tells him that from now on, he must hunt for his own food. There will be no more handouts, especially since most parts of the hyena are poisonous. Only specific muscle sections are safe to eat. As Daoden casually prepares his portion, he snaps at Xion to stop staring and get to work before sunrise. Following the order, Xion begins harvesting meat on his own. By the time the sun rises, he already looks more experienced than before. Though he still lacks a proper water source, he now carries enough food in his satchel. His improved sand-walking ability also makes traveling through the desert much easier. Feeling confident, he teases the old man, asking if he is struggling to keep up. This time, he even manages to dodge the first punch and sticks his tongue out playfully. However, the second strike lands cleanly, knocking sense back into him. As he spits out sand, Daoden bluntly tells him that a simple trick does not make him special. Still grumbling, Xion suddenly notices something unusual. The air feels slightly moist, and his mouth is no longer completely dry. At first, he thinks it might be his imagination, but the old man's reaction confirms it is real. On the other side of a nearby dune lies a desert oasis. Overwhelmed with excitement, Xion rushes toward it without thinking. He slides down the sand and plunges his head into the water, finally enjoying relief from the harsh desert heat. For the first time since arriving, he allows himself to relax. As he remains submerged, he notices a glowing light deep beneath the water. Drawn in, he begins to lose awareness, slowly running out of air. Just as danger closes in, Daeodon calls out and rushes toward him. At the last moment, he pulls Xion out of the water before a massive creature can devour him. The old man immediately confronts the beast and defeats it with a single strike. Meanwhile, Xion, still dazed, becomes distracted by the rainbow forming over the oasis, barely processing how close he came to death. Daeodon drags the creature ashore and explains that it is a sand angler, a monster that uses light to lure prey before consuming them. His tone shifts, and he harshly scolds Xion for his carelessness. Reckless behavior like that, he says, is the fastest way to die in the desert. Xion can only nod in agreement. Seeing that the lesson has sunk in, Daeodon changes the subject and orders him to start skinning the creature. The sand angler is a valuable C-rank beast, and its skin can be used to create protective clothing. Xion begins working, though his lack of skill is obvious. The old man criticizes his clumsy handling, telling him to stop treating the task so lightly. Realizing the skin is too tough for an ordinary blade, Xion channels mana into his knife, sharpening it enough to cut through. He improvises by turning the scales into needles and using tendons as thread. Despite his creativity, the first result is a complete mess. Daeodon mocks him for wasting such valuable material, but Xion refuses to give up and tries again. After several hours, he finally succeeds in crafting a decent robe. Feeling proud, he jokes about selling them in the future, but Daeodon interrupts him and tells him to stop wasting time. Instead, he presents a large organ from the creature and orders Xion to eat it, explaining that it is a rare medicinal resource. Though disgusted, Xion realizes he has no choice. He forces himself to eat it, enduring the terrible taste. However, something strange happens. Instead of feeling full, his hunger intensifies, pushing him to consume even more. Once he finishes, Daeodon warns him that the real effect is about to begin. Suddenly, Xion's body reacts violently. His throat tightens, and an intense heat spreads throughout him, as if something inside is burning out of control. Overwhelmed by pain, he collapses and begins screaming. Meanwhile, Daeodon remains calm, telling him to endure it. He speaks about how everything in life is fleeting, much like the oasis, and how creatures like the sand angler exist to maintain balance. However, Xion, writhing in pain, interrupts him and demands help instead of lectures. Despite his condition, the old man does nothing. He simply watches for a moment before lying down and going to sleep, leaving Xion to endure the agony on his own. The next day, Xion finally opens his eyes and is met with the old man staring down at him with an unsettling smile. The sight almost scares his soul out of his body, and he immediately yells at the man for nearly giving him a heart attack. After exchanging a few more light remarks, the old man asks how he feels. Only then does Xion realize something is different inside him. His body feels lighter, his muscles stronger, and the mana within him is almost overflowing. Curious, he questions what happened, comparing the sensation to some kind of super soldier enhancement. The old man calmly explains it was due to the sand angler's gallbladder, an organ that acts like a cheat item for surviving the desert and greatly boosts strength. It is extremely valuable, which makes Xion uneasy that he was allowed to use it. The old man dismisses his concern, saying it was necessary since Xion was too weak and would only slow him down. Xion protests that he is still useful at times, but the old man cuts him off and tells him to eat so they can finish the creature. 4 days later, they finally reduce the sand angler to nothing but clean bones. With no time wasted, they resume their journey. Soon after, strong dusty winds signal a coming sandstorm. Despite the harsh conditions, Xion is barely affected thanks to his improved body, and he is surprised the old man keeps walking without any signs of fatigue. Daeodon remains silent for days, prompting Xion to jokingly wonder if he is going through some kind of old man crisis. 2 weeks into the journey, Xion begins questioning if the old man even knows the destination. Just then, a giant ant monster appears behind him, and Xion instantly reacts with a sand beam attack, sensing more threats approaching. As the fight escalates, Xion quickly realizes the creature is tougher than expected when it survives his attack. His excitement turns serious as he detects multiple approaching ants using his sand sense. Without hesitation, he drives his hand into the ground, forcing hidden ants to surface as they begin to surround him. What starts as a controlled fight quickly turns chaotic as waves of ants continue to emerge. Xion grows slightly bored while repeatedly blasting them with sand, but at the same time, his technique sharpens rapidly through constant combat. He even notes that sandstorms are perfect for him since they provide virtually unlimited material to fight with. Meanwhile, Daeodon continues moving ahead without slowing down, leaving Xion to deal with everything behind him. Xion complains about the lack of loyalty, even joking that this explains why the old man is still alone in his age. While distracted, Xion suddenly senses something far more dangerous within his detection range. Unlike previous beasts, this presence sends a chilling sensation through his spine. Almost immediately, a massive stampede of ants erupts from the ground, forming an overwhelming swarm that surrounds him from all sides. Zeon turns to Diadin for help, admitting he is out of his depth, but the old man simply sits down to watch as if enjoying a show. Realizing no help is coming, Zeon understands he must handle it himself. Diadin's calm reaction also confirms that this is likely a test. Accepting the challenge, Zeon gathers sand into a massive rotating sphere and traps portions of the swarm, though more ants continuously break through. As the pressure builds, he begins losing control and is eventually dragged like debris across the battlefield. Frustrated, he even challenges the ants to fight one-on-one, but they only swarm him more aggressively. Forced to adapt, Zeon hardens sand beneath his feet and begins using it as a platform to move through the air. However, the ants counter by forming towering structures to reach him. Even mid-air, he is pulled down when they combine into larger formations, dragging him violently back to the ground. Bruised and coughing blood, Zeon struggles to stand while noticing Diadin still watching without emotion. That indifference fuels his determination. He refuses to rely on anyone and pushes forward on his own. For the first time, Diadin shows mild approval, acknowledging his spirit. He reflects that in this ruined world of endless sand, Zeon's ability is a rare blessing. True awakeners are meant to push their powers beyond limits, not live ordinary lives. Diadin remembers the ancient catastrophe that destroyed the world 100 years ago, losing his family and especially his daughter, leaving him powerless and hollow. Seeing Zeon now, refusing to break even under overwhelming odds, reminds him of what strength truly means. Inspired, Zeon unleashes a newly created technique, highly compressed sand missiles combining gravity, wind, and raw energy into devastating attacks. The battlefield is reduced to craters as the ants are wiped out in waves. Just as Zeon celebrates his success, distracted by his victory, a massive ant emerges silently from his flank and clamps down on him with crushing force. He never sensed it coming. Instantly, he realizes something is wrong inside his body. His mana is destabilizing and slipping away. A foreign sensation spreads through him as he understands the truth. He has been poisoned, and his newly formed mana pathways are being blocked. Now weakened and restrained, all Zeon can do is curse helplessly as the situation turns against him. The giant ant showed no reaction to Zeon's curses, treating him as nothing more than prey to be collected. When he eventually regained consciousness, he found himself deep underground inside a vast tunnel system, completely surrounded by his enemies. It was an ant nest. Sensing the arrival of fresh food, the colony's larvae quickly crawled toward the paralyzed human. Their piercing screeches and alien appearance were unsettling as they confirmed he posed no threat. Almost immediately, they began swarming over his body, trying to bite into his flesh. Their strength was enough to pierce skin and dig through what lay beneath. Despite being reduced to helpless prey in the middle of a disgusting feeding frenzy, Zeon could not move a single muscle. At this rate, he would be eaten alive. As his vision slowly darkened, memories of his life flashed before him. That bleak recollection sparked something deep within him. With sheer willpower, he forced his body to resist the poison and crushed one of the larvae crawling over him. The sudden movement alerted the surrounding ants, but Zeon only laughed bitterly at himself for nearly accepting death so pathetically. There wasn't a single good memory in that flashback, just emptiness. He refused to die as a nobody. That refusal pushed him beyond his limits. The markings on his forearms shifted as he regained control, and sand erupted beneath him in a violent burst, instantly obliterating the larvae around him with a spike-like explosion. The ant army panicked. Their supposed helpless captive was standing again, now surrounded by dozens of compressed sand missiles floating in the air. Looking at his forearm, Zeon noticed his rank had increased. With it came poison cleansing, stamina restoration, and a massive boost to his already overflowing mana capacity. The second line on his mark represented everything he had endured alongside Diadin over the past days. Compared to his former self, everything, power, stamina, mana output, had evolved dramatically. And yet, even with all this growth and his arsenal of sand missiles, he still couldn't land a single meaningful blow on the Ant Queen. The giant creature retaliated with blinding speed, her limbs shattering stone into dust with ease. Zeon continued his barrage, but her exoskeleton remained completely intact. Frustration built as he realized brute force alone wasn't enough. Accepting that his current methods were useless, Zeon shifted strategies. If piercing and smashing wouldn't work, then he would take the armor itself. Controlling every grain of sand he could summon, he coated the queen's entire body and focused on a twisting, ripping force, trying to peel her hardened shell away from the flesh beneath. The effect made the queen screech in agony. In response, she began gathering pure mana within her mandibles instead of retreating. She wasn't just defending, she was preparing a counterattack. Ultra-high-frequency waves erupted from her body, piercing Zeon's senses and making his ears bleed as his vision blurred under the pressure. The battle turned into a brutal contest of endurance. Zeon, despite the overwhelming pain, refused to back down. If he died here, so be it, but he would not be ignored. The stalemate finally broke when his consciousness began to fracture, his connection between mind and body snapping apart. Just as everything was about to end, Diadin reappeared, pulling him back from the brink. Barely conscious, Zeon even joked weakly about letting the old man take the final hit. Diodin, for once, acknowledged his effort. He had fought beyond his limits and earned his right to live through persistence and creativity. Daodin carried Xeon's battered body toward the fallen queen and into a small clearing, where a glowing spherical object had been left behind. When asked what it was, Diodin scribbled on the walls, explaining it was the queen's egg, something like medicine, even jokingly calling it strawberry-flavored. Confused but trusting him, Xeon asked if it would be like the sand angler's gallbladder. Diodin casually admitted it would most likely cause death. Xeon didn't hear that part due to his damaged hearing, and in his usual reckless trust consumed the egg anyway. Almost instantly, his body began to rupture as spikes of blood burst from his skin. His organs twisted violently as the process of organ inversion began, an excruciating phenomenon where internal organs are forcibly reversed and torn apart. Most would die immediately from the pain alone. Xeon endured it, screaming and cursing through blood loss and shock as he questioned whether the old man was truly helping or simply insane. As he collapsed into his own pool of blood, Diodin calmly rummaged through the queen's corpse, retrieving a glowing mana stone. Satisfied, he stored the remains in an independent space, while his sword, Creon, silently observed his actions with unease. He admitted that he might have pushed the kid too far this time. Still, there was no alternative in his mind. In this world, weakness meant death. That was simply how fate worked. Besides, Creon understood just as well as Diodin that their time was running out. By sunrise, Xeon once again defied all expectations, waking up like a drained corpse that somehow refused to stay dead. The first thing he saw was that familiar, irritating smile on a wrinkled face. Instantly, the disrespectful brat launched himself at his mentor without hesitation. Daodin calmly warned him not to stir up dust while he was still being patient, but Xeon wasn't listening. He had already formed another batch of compressed sand missiles, locking onto the old man's position. Diodin tried to stop him, but Xeon went through with the attack anyway. To be fair, he wasn't thinking clearly. His mind was still clouded, and he genuinely believed the old man had tried to kill him. Sand erupted violently as he buried Diodin under layers of pressure and debris. Still not stopping, Xeon followed up by manipulating jagged stalactites from the cavern ceiling, snapping one loose and dropping it like a spear toward the old man. The entire sequence drained him completely, both mana and stamina pushed to their limits. While Xeon ranted about betrayal and attempted murder, Diodin only sighed and questioned his intelligence. Even if the queen's egg had side effects, that was no excuse to stop using his brain entirely. What shocked Xeon more wasn't his own outburst. It was the fact that Diodin stood there completely unharmed, not a scratch, not even dust on his clothes. It made him realize something simple but terrifying. If the old man truly wanted him dead, a single flick would have been enough. Why would someone like that bother poisoning him at all? The thought stung, but it also made sense. Diodin finally explained the truth. The queen's egg was not just poison, it was also a refinement catalyst. It violently twists and tears the body's internal structure, yes, but in surviving it, the body expels every impurity and resets its mana pathways. In that broken state, mana capacity expands rapidly to fill the newly cleansed space. In short, Xeon hadn't been harmed randomly. He had been forced through a brutal evolution, and judging from the reaction during his attempt to kill Diodin, his mana had likely increased 3 to 4 times over. Once the explanation settled in, Xeon immediately switched tone, apologizing profusely and even clinging to the old man in relief, claiming he wasn't in his right mind earlier. Diodin looked visibly uncomfortable, mostly because he was being hugged by a sweaty, snot-covered idiot, but he didn't make a big deal out of it. Fortunately, the egg had also restored Xeon's injuries, including his eardrums, which meant he could now hear insults clearly again. Internally, Diodin discussed the situation with Creon, acknowledging the risk they took. In truth, Xeon's apology was only half genuine. Part of him was just trying to avoid further punishment. Still, Diodin concluded the gamble was necessary. If the boy didn't grow fast enough, he would simply become dead weight. In this world, reckless gambles sometimes paid off. Without warning, Diodin lifted Xeon as if he weighed nothing. Xeon protested, saying he could walk now, but the old man ignored him. There was a faster way out. Diodin pointed upward toward the cavern ceiling, and Xeon immediately understood he wouldn't have a choice in how this ended. Moments later, the surface of the desert shattered as they erupted upward from below. Sand exploded outward as they returned to the open wasteland. Xeon complained immediately. He wasn't fond of Diodin's idea of travel. The old man simply replied that leisurely travel wasn't an option when Xeon had been sleeping for 4 days straight. Their argument was cut short when Diodin suddenly stopped, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. Xeon tried to act indifferent, claiming nothing could surprise him anymore, until he followed the same line of sight and immediately shut up. Far across the desert stood a massive figure, a land tortoise the size of a small island, slowly moving through the sands. Even from nearly 30 kilometers away, its scale was overwhelming. Diodin identified it as the mobile fortress Archelon, a B-rank magic beast, whose defenses rivaled even A-rank monsters. It was once tamed and modified by powerful individuals, its shell transformed into a traveling fortress. As the colossal beast passed, Xeon and Diodin looked like nothing more than specks of dust beneath its feet. The sheer scale of it forced Zeon to finally understand just how vast the world truly was. Then, as the Archelon halted, a figure leapt down from its shell. Gaodan's expression shifted slightly. Whoever had just arrived wasn't a stranger. In fact, it had been a long time since these two old men last met. The old dude stated that it's been a while since they both met before stating his name, Pavilsa. Pavilsa replied that Deoden is still abnormal despite being over 100 years old. The two continued yapping about territory and Pavilsa's problem on the infestation of scavengers while our boy Zeon watched in the sidelines. He even wonders how both of these two fossils are so strong despite their age. Suddenly, the giant turtle's head moved and lowered to their side, offering a ladder. Pavilsa told the duo to follow him while the turtle stared at our boy intently, making him nervous. Noticing this, Pavilsa asked Deoden who this scrawny kid is, to which Deoden replied that he just picked up some trash to help our Mother Earth from pollution. Pavilsa stated that the world must be ending because he is dragging someone with him. The next scene left our boy shocked. Inside the huge Oer turtle there's an entire civilization living. Deoden told Zeon that it is the Moke clan, to which Zeon asked if they are all blood-related. Deoden did not deny it and even stated that they are all descendants of Pavilsa, and these people claim that they are the chosen ones even though they can't do nothing without the big Oer turtle. Pavilsa then chimed in, asking what does Deoden know to blabber things like that. Deoden, not letting it slide, roasted Pavilsa that if he died, the big turtle will abandon these people. The scene then shifted to a grand room, to which Pavilsa asked if he can see the goodies. Deoden then opened a black portal before dumping a massive amount of treasure, which left Zeon shocked and even asked Deoden how many lives he had taken, to which Deoden replied that he will be next. Zeon then asked Deoden if he was a magic type to be able to cast a portal that the treasure came from, to which Deoden shouted at Zeon, wondering how he doesn't know a subspace, even roasting him as a dumbass. Meanwhile, in the background, Pavilsa observed the treasure carefully. Pavilsa then stated that every single treasure is a top-grade item, to which Deoden asked him to stop and just get on with it. Pavilsa asked him to calm down. He then asked him what he wants for those loot, to which he replied a breastplate made out of the corpse of the wolf ant queen and a subspace for our boy. Pavilsa asked what he will be using it for before picking up Zeon like a pet and saying it's all for him. Damn, we got some dad and son moments now. Pavilsa thought to himself that seeing Deoden care for someone is extremely rare. He wondered what that kid did. He then called out a name, Kaylee. The door burst open and what came behind it made our boy blush. A baddie appeared, asking if she was called. Pavilsa then asked Kaylee if she still got the subspace bracelet, which she doesn't anymore, but she then replied that she still has the gloves before saying she got it enhanced. Pavilsa then instructed Kaylee to give it to our boy. Kaylee is now mad because she treasures that glove. Deoden then asked Kaylee, wondering how she became an enchanter. Startled, Kaylee then asked who this fossil is. Deoden stated that having an enchanter is a rare and valuable profession even in Neo Soul, as expected for Pavilsa's granddaughter. Pavilsa then cut them both off and instructed Kaylee to go tell Noel to craft the breastplate. Deoden requested. Kaylee left and asked our boy to follow her, to which Zeon happily complied, leaving the two fossils in the room. The scene shifted to an alley where Kaylee asked what our boy's relationship with Deoden is. Zeon replied that he just met him and since then he was being dragged around, to which Kaylee angrily asked how he is alive if he was just being dragged around. Zeon then figured out that Kaylee is in the same case as him. She then warned our boy to be careful because Deoden is a monster under human skin, to which Zeon did not deny. The scene then shifted to Kaylee's workshop. She asked our boy not to be surprised before opening a huge door, which indeed left our boy shocked. Zeon is left stunned by all the equipment, to which Kaylee boasted that she made all of those. She then presented a glove, calling it the exquisite harmony of the ironclad starfish frame and adamantium. I know, a lot for mere gloves. Zeon then asked if it is auto-repair, to which she confirmed and even boasted that it has fire resistance and can even be equipped with artifacts like the Thanos gauntlet. He then asked Kaylee if it is really okay to take the glove, to which Kaylee replied that it can't be helped since her grandfather instructed her to do so. She then handed it to our boy before warning him that once she equipped an item into it, there's no turn backsy. Our boy tried to take it, but Kaylee wouldn't let go, leading to both of them having a tug of war. She then shouted that she can't just give the gloves to a nobody like our boy, to which Zeon asked what can they both do since they are both instructed to. Zeon then roasted Kaylee, saying he will take care of it because it is now his own child. Suddenly the building began to shake, to which our boy wondered if taking the glove was the reason, to which Kaylee denied before stating that it is the cry of the big boy turtle and they had arrived. Zeon asked who she was talking about. Inside the room, the two fossils also noticed the shakes. The scene shifted outside, where the scavengers are making their way to the huge R turtle. The two ran while our boy asked what the scavengers were all about. Kaylee quickly explained that they were from the Black Shark clan. What a cringy-ass name. She added that their leader was a lunatic D-rank awakener, and every single member of the group was also awakened. They did not only loot people, they killed for fun as well. The two soon arrived at the place where the two fossils were staying. Bursting through the door, Kaylee shouted her grandfather's name. Pavilsa immediately acknowledged them and stated that they had already seen the scavengers approaching. Panicking, Kaylee asked if they should move Archelon somewhere else, but Pavilsa replied that it was useless because the scavengers would catch up to them in no time. Their only option now was to fight. Kaylee instantly agreed and said that she would gather the combat members right away. Suddenly, a voice interrupted them and rejected the idea. Dioden declared that they would handle the situation themselves, shocking Kaylee. He then called Zeon and told him to take care of everything alone. Confused, Zeon repeated the order in disbelief. Dioden explained that our boy should repay the treasure he had received. Zeon immediately argued that there was no way he could defeat a D-ranked awakener. Dioden then asked if our boy was scared. The scene shifted outside as our boy reluctantly accepted the task, remembering how he got rage-baited into fighting the scavengers. Gathering his power, he estimated that the enemies would arrive in less than 5 minutes. Wearing the glove Kaylee had given him, he prepared himself while wondering how he could possibly defeat an awakener ranked far above him. The scene shifted back to the two fossils. Pavilsa asked if our boy would really be fine alone, but Dioden questioned what he meant by that. Pavilsa clarified that he was worried whether our boy could truly defeat the scavengers by himself. Dioden coldly answered that if our boy died, then he died. Pavilsa silently thought to himself that even a prodigy could fall without proper guidance. However, if our boy managed to push through this challenge, he could rise to an entirely different level. Pavilsa then shouted something toward our boy. Yes, it's blurred in the panel. Soon after, the scavengers finally arrived. The baddie called out to their captain, Gawain, and asked if they should separate the useful people to sell later. The leader rejected the idea and declared that they would butcher everyone alive instead. The crew happily agreed before charging toward the giant turtle all at once. Suddenly, one of the camels was dragged beneath the sand, leaving its rider stunned and confused. In the next moment, the ground split apart and buried several scavengers alive. The captain wondered if the sand itself was moving. The baddie quickly asked if he was alright, while the leader shouted that somebody had set up a trap. Without warning, our boy appeared behind the baddie and grabbed her from behind. Bro saw the opportunity and took it without the hesitation. Shocked, the baddie wondered when our boy had appeared there. The leader immediately shouted for him to let her go, but countless sand spikes suddenly burst through her body, killing her instantly. After that, our boy fearlessly asked who would be next. Another scavenger suddenly appeared behind Zeon, with a katana glowing in a red aura, and swung directly at him. However, our boy easily blocked the attack using his sand abilities. The leader then shouted for everyone to look down. Beneath them, multiple sand spikes erupted from the ground. Trying to stop the attack, the swordsman slashed downward. Seeing an opening, the leader gathered his mana and prepared to punch our boy directly. However, our boy suddenly transformed into sand once again. The leader continued attacking and punched through the sand, only to realize that his own crew members had already been impaled and killed by our boy. Zeon stared at the leader with grim eyes, making it clear that he would be next. The scene then shifted back to what Pavilsa had said earlier. He explained to our boy that the scavengers were no longer human and should not be treated as such. They murdered innocent people and violated women and children for entertainment, turning themselves into monsters. Hearing that made our boy furious and fully determined to kill every scavenger standing before him. The scene returned to the present as Zeon prepared his sand powers while the leader gathered a blazing red aura around both of his hands. Multiple sand bullets flew toward the leader, but he easily deflected every single one. Angered, the leader demanded that Zeon fight seriously instead of relying on cheap tricks. He threatened that once he defeated our boy, he would not allow him to die easily. He promised to torture Zeon and make him beg for death while giving him some heavenly backshots. Cutting him off, Zeon calmly asked if those were his final words, which only made the leader even more rage-baited. Watching from the sidelines, Dioden seemed amused by our boy's rage-baiting skills. Before the battle resumed, our boy mocked the leader once more and prepared himself for the fight ahead. The masked man was now furious as his comrade's body lay motionless on the ground. Mashinoto considered those fallen warriors to be the very people he had acknowledged, yet they had been defeated by what he believed was merely an amateur. Because of this, he began to question who Zhao truly was. At the same time, Zhao formed a massive sand dragon, causing the masked man to wonder what kind of ability he was using. Gathering aura into his hand, the masked man declared that he was done playing around and insisted that Zhao should stop hiding within the sand if he truly was an awakener. In response, Zhao prepared several sand bullets and fired them toward his opponent. However, the masked man created a force field that blocked every attack. Mockingly, he asked what Zhao planned to do next. Suddenly, something caught him off guard. Zhao had vanished. A blade suddenly descended toward his neck, but it shattered upon impact. Shocked by the failure of his attack, Zhao wondered if the masked man had somehow predicted his move. The masked man smiled and stated that Zhao had finally entered his range. Before Zion could react, the masked man grabbed him and slammed him into the ground. He declared that a single mistake in battle could cost someone their life. Strengthening his power, he relentlessly pummeled Zeon, claiming that every punch was meant for his fallen comrades. He further stated that regardless of what ability Zeon possessed, it would become useless the moment he entered his range. Suddenly, two giant sand hands emerged and grabbed the masked man's fists, leaving him stunned. Zeon had clearly been pinned to the ground, making the situation impossible to understand. Moments later, he realized that it was all part of Zeon's sand manipulation. He concluded that Zeon had removed his gauntlet to escape. However, it was already too late. The sand pierced through his body before a barrage of sand projectiles crashed into him. The masked man blamed himself for allowing Zeon to escape after panicking. He also noticed that his wound was significantly shallower than before, indicating that Zeon's power had weakened. Remembering how much stronger the previous attacks had been, he concluded that the gauntlet must have been amplifying Zeon's abilities. The masked man then wondered if Zeon possessed a rare wind attribute, as abilities of that nature were uncommon even among wind users. Convinced that he had uncovered Zeon's secret, he charged forward and shouted that he had figured out Zeon's trick. As he prepared to unleash a devastating punch, Zeon suddenly revealed a disturbing smile. In the next instant, a spear of sand burst through the masked man's back from behind. Having gained the upper hand, Zeon declared that the masked man had finally let his guard down. The masked man grabbed the sand spear and arrived at a terrifying realization. Zeon was no longer wearing the gauntlet, meaning that he was truly wielding the power of sand itself. Even then, he refused to accept the fact that someone could use the very world around them as a weapon. Such an ability seemed impossible to exist. Before he could process it further, he was completely swallowed by the sand. The scene then shifted to the other elder, who was left utterly shocked after discovering that Zeon could control sand. That realization meant the entire desert could serve as both his sword and shield. He was even more surprised because Gawain was an exceptionally experienced combatant, making Zeon's victory almost unbelievable. The elder then looked toward Diodon and wondered where he had found someone like Zeon. Zeon knelt on the ground while clutching his injured arm as blood dripped from his body. He muttered that it had been a close call. If he had taken one more Mike Tyson punch, he was finished. He then wondered whether Diodon would praise him for the victory. However, a powerful strike suddenly slammed into the ground beside him, startling him. The impact created a massive crater, leaving Zeon confused about what had just happened. Moments later, Diodon shouted and demanded to know how Zeon could even think about returning after doing such a poor job. Confused, Zeon asked what he had done wrong this time. Diodon looked at him with disgust before explaining that Zeon had left one enemy alive. He pointed out that the swordsman had been carrying a spare weapon and had intended to ambush him. Zeon was left speechless. Diodon then asked how long Zeon intended to remain so foolish. He ordered him to go back and warned that such a mindset would have gotten him killed long ago. The other two then approached Zeon. The elder explained that every member of Archelon was a non-combatant and expressed his gratitude for Zeon's actions. He stated that countless lives would have been lost if Zeon had not defeated the bandits. Kaylee immediately hugged Zeon and praised him for taking down the entire Black Shark squad by himself. She also told him not to take Diodon's words too seriously because the old man's standards were absurdly high. Zeon interrupted her and admitted that Mashimoto could have ambushed him because he had knowingly left him alive. He confessed that part of him had hoped the man would simply stay down. Even though those men were criminals, Zeon still lacked the courage to face death directly because he did not want to bear the guilt of taking a life. Because of that, he admitted that Diodon's criticism was justified. He further stated that Diodon had likely witnessed countless deaths throughout his life, making this his own harsh way of looking out for him. His words shocked both of them. Zeon continued by saying that Diodon was terrible at expressing himself, but deep down he genuinely cared. The elder was stunned to hear someone speak positively about Diodon, while Kaylee wondered if Zeon had somehow hit his head. The elder then thought to himself that Diodon was probably right. The fact that Zeon could understand something so profound despite his young age showed remarkable maturity. He felt both relieved and sorry that the younger generation had to suffer because of the mistakes of their elders. Afterward, he instructed the two of them to return. The scene then shifted as Diodon sat alone reading a book with no title on its cover. Suddenly, the door burst open. Zeon stormed inside and demanded to know why Diodon had been pretending not to hear him. Diodon immediately called him a coward and questioned whether he intended to remain there any longer. The remark confused Zeon. Refusing to back down, he argued that Diodon should not underestimate him, and insisted that such words would never break his spirit. Diodon cut him off and pointed out that Zeon's hands were still trembling. He explained that such a reaction was completely natural, and that it would be far stranger if Zeon felt nothing at all. Diodon continued by explaining that killing another person was never easy because it meant ending a life. The guilt from such an act would remain with someone forever. He told Zeon that there was no need to force himself to move on. If he ever became numb to killing, he would be no different from the very people he had fought. Diodon declared that the pain Zeon was experiencing was proof that he was still human. Because of that, if he truly could not endure it, he was free to return home. In response, Zeon slammed his hand onto the table and declared that he would not back down. He insisted that something like this would not defeat him and claimed that he could handle it himself. He then added that there was no way he could leave behind such a stubborn old fossil. Those words caused Diodon to smile. The scene shifted once again as a massive hammer crashed down repeatedly. Numerous craftsmen surrounded Crayon, striking it as they worked tirelessly. Kaylee was amazed to see so many skilled blacksmiths gathered in one place. The elder explained that their presence was only natural because they were currently trying to calm Diodon's sword. Kaylee replied that the process had already taken several days and wondered how much power could possibly be flowing through that huge-ass sword. The elder then revealed that the weapon was a masterpiece forged from one man's lifelong obsession. Curious, Kaylee asked who could have created such an extraordinary blade, only to learn that its creator was Crayon himself. She was surprised that the sword and its creator shared the same name. Before the discussion could continue, the elder interrupted and stated that both of them would be leaving soon, so the story could wait until later. He reminded her that Daeodon was not the type of person who remained in one place for long. Suddenly both of them were shocked by the sight before them. Zeon was lying face down on the ground with his head pressed against the floor. The elder immediately asked Daeodon what exactly was happening. Daeodon simply replied that it was part of Zeon's education. The scene shifted as 4 elves were seen fleeing from something, their faces etched with urgency. Zeon spotted them and immediately remarked to Daeodon that it was his first time seeing demi-humans. It was then revealed that the two of them were standing atop a huge rock. One of the elves spotted them and pointed in their direction. Another responded, suggesting that they use them as monster bait, certain that it would distract the creature. Zeon, thinking to himself, questioned why they would even consider using them that way. Confused, he further thought to himself that elves were supposed to be a noble race, and that Kaylee was far better than any of them. Suddenly, the elves arrived before them, catching Zeon off guard. The elves began demanding that the two of them get off the rock, while the others visibly showed signs of exhaustion. One elf escalated the situation further. She shouted at them to climb down and lure the monster away, threatening them with a bow aimed directly at the two. The 4 elves took their stances and prepared for a fierce confrontation. Zeon, now even more baffled, questioned why they could not simply keep running, and why they were demanding that he and Daeodon face the monster and act as bait themselves. Suddenly, Zeon felt an extreme aura wash over him. At first, he thought some unseen monster had appeared out of nowhere, as the elves before them seemed to be experiencing the same overwhelming pressure. But he soon realized that despite having encountered countless monsters and awakeners, this particular feeling was unlike anything he had ever experienced before. It was the primal survival instinct born from pure terror. Forcing himself to locate the source, it did not take long to figure it out. It was Daeodon. His face bore an extremely angry expression to the point that his eyes were glowing red and his veins were bulging. One of the elves wondered aloud how a mere human like him could even exist before forcing herself to snap out of it and remind herself that he was merely a human. When she looked to her companions, she found that they had all been weakened and overtaken by the aura Daeodon was emitting. Finally, the elf made a decision on her own and declared that they had to kill Daeodon, that a human like him should not exist at all. Zeon, shocked, cried out, asking if she had lost her mind, calling out Daeodon's name in alarm. But before the arrow could reach the old fossil, he caught it with his bare hands, then crushed it and fixed the elves with a dead stare. The elf panicked. She shouted at Savelin and Nilelka to get up and take their battle stances, declaring that their only goal was to kill Daeodon. But in a sudden flash, a hand gripped her by the mouth and hoisted her into the air. Daeodon finally broke his silence, stating that he had thought he killed all of them decades ago, and demanding to know where they had been hiding. The others cried out her name, Chihora, in alarm. They raised their weapons and aimed them at Daeodon. One elf demanded that he shut his mouth and release Chihora that very second, while another added that it was outrageous for a mere human to lay hands on an elf. Tightening his grip, Daeodon repeated his question with a daring voice, asking how they had all managed to survive. Now furious, he demanded to know who they had killed this time in order to stay alive, before crushing one of the elves as though she were a tomato. The scene left the remaining 3 elves in horror. They cried out, asking why Chihora had to die instead of the humans. Daeodon lifted his foot and stomped it into the ground with such force that the entire mountain began to collapse. He then spoke, reciting what he believed to be the elves' creed. "We do not care how many humans die for our sake. Human lives are worth less than insects. Humans deserve to die, not the elves." He went on, adding that it was because of elves like them that the world had ended up the way it did, and yet they refused to mend their ways. Zeon, now confused, found himself wondering whether it was truly because of demi-humans like those elves that the world had come to this. Suddenly, the monster the elves had been fleeing from earlier arrived, a massive red creature with yellow eyes and red flames. Seizing the opportunity, the elves were delighted by its arrival. Seeing it as perfect timing, they devised a plan to pit the monster and Daeodon against each other. One of them declared that Akara should throw Zeon, the weaker human, to the monster first, leaving Zeon visibly shaken. She continued, saying that in the meantime Nalka and she would engage Daeodon to buy time, though in reality she was already split in half. By the time she realized it, it was too late. She found herself wondering why the world around her seemed misaligned, before comprehending that she had already been cleaved in two, and that the massive monster that had been chasing them had been split in half by the very same strike. The remaining elves, now horrified, called out to Sovelin, frantically asking if she could hear them as she fell. Then without warning, Daeodon grabbed the next elf by the mouth. He stared at her and demanded to know if their village was nearby. Daeodon offered her a deal. He would let go if she answered him, and revealed the location of their village. The elf attempted to mock him, but before the words could leave her mouth, the old fossil had already driven her into the ground, crushing her in the process. Daeodon then turned, in the manner of those from horror movies, toward the next elf, who had already soiled herself in terror. She shouted at him with a shaking voice to stay away, trembling uncontrollably. Zeon rushed toward Daeodon and urged him to wait, insisting that he let him know what was going on. But before he could get close, Deowaden shoved him aside with one hand with such force that Zeon was sent flying into the nearby rocks. Returning his attention to the elf, Deowaden taunted her, pointing out that she was trembling before a human and had lowered herself to such a pitiful state. With a mocking smile, he once again demanded the location of their village. She asked why a human would ever seek out an elven village, but before she could finish the sentence, Deowaden fixed her with a stare that defied description, his eyes radiating pure rage and killing intent. Trembling, the elf had no choice but to gesture in the direction. Deowaden thanked her. She then begged for her life, pleading that she had been wrong. Deowaden readied himself and launched off in that direction with a sudden explosive force, leaving behind a massive eruption of sand and dust. The elf sat there in his wake, regretting having revealed the location of the village as tears welled up in her eyes. But she managed a weak laugh, consoling herself with the thought that at least she had survived. What a selfish dumbass. Before she even knew it, however, her own head was floating. It had already been severed. The scene then shifted to Zeon as he lay among the rubble, slowly pulling himself up. He thought to himself that had it not been for the chest plate, his ribs would have been shattered to dust. He looked around, silently wondering why Deowaden would go this far. Fixing his gaze on the direction Deowaden had gone, he followed. As he traveled, he recalled Deowaden's words that he had already killed all of those elves decades ago, as the scene pulled back from above, revealing just how small Zeon appeared beside the enormous monster that Deowaden one-tapped.